I apologize about the sound. I've been having some technical glitches. This is the first few days doing this, and I thought I had solved this problem, but apparently not. Just asking my producer now if it's better. Okay, sorry about that. So we'll keep going from here. So yeah, again, I apologize about the audio issues. Alright, so going back after bishop b1, black played f5. Again, I think g6 would have been maybe a better way to hold, at least for a little while. And now after castles, the problem is that Magnus just has a very simple plan of eventually playing e4, e5. And you know what? I'm going to start over with the analysis of this position. I'm going to go back just so everybody can hear. I apologize for the sound issue. So it starts as a queen's gambit, and the first interesting moment is here. Black played h6, and all bishop moves are possible here. It's possible to capture on f6, it's possible to play bishop h4, and it's possible to play bishop f4. Bishop takes f6 is probably the least threatening move, but it does have some positional venom. Bishop h4 is a move that was played in pretty much in a bunch of World Championship games, for example, Kasparov-Karpov, and there are a lot of variations, either b6 or knight e4, the two main moves. But in this game, Magnus plays bishop f4, which is probably the least played move, and is sort of a weird move only because the variations where you play bishop f4 first, without playing bishop g5, are very popular, and it seems like you're giving black an extra useful move of playing h6. But Magnus in the post-game interview said that he wanted his opponent to be thinking on his own, and to be fair, this move has been played a lot of times, including one time by Dubov. I saw one game that Dubov played in the Aeroflot Open, I think a couple of years ago, 1 or 2 years ago. And so black plays in the same way that they play, when the pawn is on h7. c5 takes, a3, knight c6, queen c2. And now in the position without h6, black usually plays queen a5, sorry, which is it's kind of an odd move, but the queen is actually misplaced on d8, and white always has these rook d1 or castles queenside. So for example, d4 here would be well met by either rook d1 or castling. So queen a5 is the main move. It's also possible to play a move like bishop e7. But in this game, Kovalyov decides that knight h5 makes sense because he's played h6, so he's like, I got a free tempo here. It's taking the square away from the bishop, so I can get the bishop pair. In hindsight, maybe this was kind of a dubious choice. I think queen a5 is probably the best move. In the Dubov game, actually, on queen a5, Dubov had played rook a2, and it's hard to believe that this move gives an advantage. It was actually against one of the players who's playing in the Challengers tournament, Abdutasarov, and black was fine in that game. So, but yeah, Kovalyov plays knight h5, bishop g3, and even though he's getting the bishop pair, the problem is that his king is actually a little bit weak. So he's had the advantage of being able to get the bishop pair, but with the pawn already on h6, the light squares are weak, especially with the knight sort of the only defender of the king side here leaving its post. It seems like white has kind of an easy game. So immediately Magnus plays bishop a2. The idea is to go bishop b1 at some point and take advantage of the fact that black really doesn't want to play g6 after they've committed their pawn to h6 because that pawn is weak. And we'll look at a variation with that in just a little bit. So he plays a6, rook d1, the queen goes to a5, which is really the only logical square for the queen, bishop b1. And now he had a tough decision to make and decided to play f5, which is a very big commitment. It's interesting to look at what could have happened if he played g6 instead. G6 would probably be met by knight h4, threatening to play knight takes g6, and it's not an easy move to meet. Basically, there are two two main ways. I mean, bishop takes h4. Bishop takes h4 is a very big concession, and I could see how black wouldn't want to go for this position, and that's probably why he played f5, because here with the bishop there and attack, and it's not easy to develop the last piece. White is definitely much better. But he could try taking on g3, and then the variations are complicated. Either pawn takes g3, which is the simpler move, threatening knight takes g6, but allowing black to at least defend by playing bishop takes, rook takes, and then some move to cover the h6 pawn. And white is better, but it's certainly not over, and it's still a symmetrical position. So there's if material comes off, it could well be a draw. But white does have a very interesting possibility. Instead of recapturing the knight on g3, they can play knight takes g6. Of course, if pawn takes g6, queen takes g6 is going to be mate on h7. So that leaves knight takes h1 as one possibility. Knight takes e7. Now, if knight takes e7, queen h7 is mate. So we have to try king g7, which I believe loses, but I don't remember exactly how. I believe it's got to be queen h7, king f6. And now some good move that I can't quite find, but maybe just knight takes c6. Actually, maybe it was knight takes c8. Now I think I remember, that's why I couldn't find it, because it's such an odd move. It seems to give a piece that's active and about to checkmate for the bishop that is passive and not doing anything. But the idea is that next move we can play rook d7 with queen takes h6, and this is an overwhelming. There's also knight e4 coming. So this is overwhelming. However, instead of knight takes h1, the best move for black is knight f5, and this is just kind of a mess, although I think Black is probably struggling a little bit after g4. White wins the piece back. So complicated variation, but maybe that was better than the static weakness that follows playing f5. So here, the rest of the game is actually quite quick. Magnus plays e4 and opens up the position. You can't really keep it closed for very long. So black wins a pawn, but here Magnus in the interview said he thought he was already just completely winning, which is probably a very correct assessment, but a little bit bold to make that claim that he's just winning already. But it seems to be true. I couldn't really find any good way for black to play here. The light squares with this diagonal and this diagonal are just too weak. And Magnus said that maybe he had another way to win that was more convincing, but the rest of the game was kind of was sort of easy for Magnus, and so really a good win, and he's on a roll, and he's definitely in a dangerous position. Very quickly, I'll just show you how he wins a piece here. Queen d4 check, and the knight falls, and the rest was just easy technique for Magnus, and black resigned here. And certainly in this case it was a fair moment to resign, unlike the last two games where his opponent maybe could have made him work a little bit harder at the end. Now we're going to look quickly at the Fabiano game against Ali Reza, which was also a very interesting opening, and a game that wasn't decided in the opening, though. It just was very complicated. So Ali Reza plays the King's Indian. Again, he's really not shying away from complications, not trying to get boring positions against these monsters that he's playing. So he plays knight c6, which is a very provocative line. Frankly, I don't love the position that he got, although Fabiano said that he was completely surprised by this move. So clearly, Ali Reza had never played it before. But I find it hard to believe that lines like this that just sort of provoke white to make moves that they would probably like to make anyway. I find it hard to believe that they're playable, but of course sometimes they are. Now this is the first sort of interesting moment here. There are many options for white, but Fabiano plays g4, which I actually really like this move, because he doesn't allow black an easy way to play e5. So if you play knight f3, then e5 is interesting, and has been played by a few people with some kind of crazy crazy ideas. Like I think you can play knight h5 here and play on the dark squares, and these get a little bit messy. But g4 in this position doesn't allow that at all. So now black really has only one plan, which is to play c6 to kind of free themselves. Now he reverts to knight f3. E5 wouldn't work here because of pawn takes c6 at some point, or actually no. On e5 now you can simply play f5, and that's just too much space to give up. You know, g5 is coming. So c takes d5, c takes d5, b6. And now was actually an interesting moment. Knight d4 is super tempting. It's almost impossible not to play this move because, you know, the knight is coming to c6. But when I looked at it, I actually realized that maybe bishop g2 would have been a little bit more precise, because we'll see why. So if he plays a knight c5 now, which is the normal move, you actually have the possibility of playing queen c2, and then on bishop a6, it seems quite good to castle queenside here. And now, you know, next few moves, white is probably going to bring their knight over here. And this seems like a difficult position for black to play. I would really like to be white in this position. And of course, it's not over. But after rook c8, for example, knight d4, this position is already overwhelming. At some point, white may play e5 or g5. In the game, he plays knight d4 first, and the difference is that after knight c5, now he can't play bishop g2 so easily, because here bishop a6 is annoying with the knight coming to d3 check. Actually, black might be better here just because of that move. So after knight c5 now, he plays queen f3. But of course, that's a little bit of a more awkward setup. And now, sort of by force, well, not by force, but after bishop b7, Fabiano chooses a very forcing variation, which he assessed. He said he just thought it was complicated and unbalanced, but he really thought he couldn't be worse, and that's probably fair. So you know, what he did was not bad. I just think the other line was maybe a little bit more convincing. So this is a piece sacrifice for pawns, and Ali Reza actually manages to get 4 pawns in this position, which is a lot of pawns. And I'm going quickly just so we can move along, but there's a lot more analysis that could be done in this position. But this is a position, you know, Fabiano said he thought he was getting this position by force, and he thought it wouldn't be worse for him. And even though black has 4 pawns, Fabiano was saying that in a lot of cases, black actually wishes that this d pawn was gone, because then they would have a nice file for their rook. And in fact, we'll go forward a few moves here to what I think is the key moment. You know, black is trying to give this d pawn away, and white never takes it. So he just likes to keep his pieces in front of it, blockade it, and that makes it difficult for black to improve their position. And so I think this position is probably just only slightly better for white, but it's definitely much easier to play for white, and in practice it's very hard for black to play. And here I think Ali Reza made sort of the critical mistake. He really probably needed to kind of sit, and instead he did the very tempting thing, which is, you know, you have a bunch of passed pawns. There's an old chess saying that says passed pawns must be pushed, and so he starts and pushes g5. But unfortunately, Fabiano had a very strong response here, and basically he said after the game that the problem with pushing the pawns is that it really opens up the king, and it sounds obvious, but it was hard to resist. And so he plays rook g1, king f8. The main problem here is that white wants to play h4, so he feels like he has to play king f8, h4, h6, and even though he keeps the pawn structure intact, the king is just in some real trouble now. In some cases, this diagonal plays a factor with the king on f8, and Fabiano has the idea of doubling on the h-file and playing rook h6. Suddenly, there's real problems in this position. In fact, I think it might already be lost. And so the game continues a little bit. The pawns look really dangerous, but the position is just, I think here it's just completely lost. Taking with the queen wouldn't work because of rook e1. So he's forced to play king takes e6, and now this threatens rook h6, so we have a long sort of forcing sequence here. f2, rook f1, the king moves, rook h6, and now it's just basically over, because even though materially it's about equal, the king is just weak, and really all the pawns are falling also. So the rest of the game was straightforward for Fabiano. Here, after rook d6, he just has a forced sort of mating sequence. I think Alireza was also in some time trouble, heading into move 40 here, and but here, I think he would have lost anyway. He resigned here because on king e6, you actually can play a few things, but there's either knight takes g5 or rook takes f6, which wins the queen. So a very nice game for Fabiano. He's sort of he's had a very solid tournament, hasn't been in trouble too much, and he's leading and undefeated. So so definitely a solid tournament for Fabiano so far. I did want to show you the cross table actually. Let me push that through. Give me 1 second. So this is the cross table. Fabiano in the sole lead with 7 out of 10. Magnus in second with 6.5, and then Wesley So and Jordan Van Forest, who's having a really good tournament, just right behind Magnus. And in terms of pairings, because going into the last 3 rounds, pairings start to matter. Fabiano probably has slightly easier pairings than Magnus does. He's playing Kovalyov with black, but Kovalyov has had a pretty shaky tournament. Then he's white against Duda, and then he plays black against Artemiev. While Magnus, the first two are similar, but he's playing black against Duda, white against Artemiev. But then he has the black pieces against Wesley So in the last round. That could be a really important game for the tournament, sort of for everyone involved. So that's sort of what it is heading into the last few rounds. They do have a rest day coming up. I will show you now. I'll start with this Anish Giri game because it was kind of funny. Anish said of this game that this is the one opponent that when he plays against him, he feels like he is the worst opening player. Anish normally feels like he's an opening expert, but this one Dubov is very strong in the opening. And in this game, Anish maybe gave him too much respect. This is a somewhat unusual move order for both sides. And after c takes d4, knight takes d4, e5 is considered to be the right move, and black is really supposed to be completely okay. There's a lot of different lines, but something like this, d4, and you can take, pawn takes, and black has a pretty pleasant position as far as I know. But of course, Dubov being who he is, I'm sure Anish thought that he had something up his sleeve, and maybe he did. But the theory, at least the known theory, is that this is okay. I'm sure Dubov had some ideas though. But because of that, Anish decides to avoid the theoretical variation and plays bishop e7. But he just kind of missed that after pawn takes d5, knight takes d5. By the way, if you take with the pawn here, it's a normal position, but a sort of a bad, sort of a not ideal version of the Tarish defense, where white is going to be at least slightly better, maybe even more than slightly better, just not really the position that you want. So he plays knight takes d5, but after bishop takes e7, knight takes e7, knight b5, which he says he just missed in his early calculation, and now he's really got kind of a horrible position. It's not lost, of course, but it's just for Anish to get into this kind of trouble this early without any real complications is very unusual, and but he somehow manages to survive this game and make a draw in just 20 moves. So certainly possible here to play knight d6 check. By the way, king e7, knight takes, and now the king is out in the open for a few moves, and you have a bishop against a knight. So certainly a better position for white. Maybe queen a4, maybe just g3. Either way, white can be better in about 100 different ways in this position. He played g3, which is a good move also. Queen takes, rook takes. Knight a6 is forced to stop knight c7. Bishop g2, king e7, and this just looks like a bad version of almost any variation of the Catalan. The knight on a6 is really misplaced, and it would be conceivable here to play either a3 followed by b4 or f4, king f2. I think white just started to play kind of carelessly here and let the advantage slip away a little bit. Now, Anish has achieved one goal, which is to develop his bishop, and he is closer to being equal. Still far, but closer. Now knight d6 I think was just a bad move. He should have just played b4 and kept the pressure rather than allowing black to kind of get out. But even Anish was saying that he was very surprised that his opponent offered a draw, and he said something like, well, it seems like he was less interested after the opening. He was less interested to play once the opening was over, which is a sort of a funny comment, obviously because Dubov is such an opening expert. But Anish continues to play to at least have solid results. I don't think he would say that his opening was solid today. It was sort of a mishit on the opening, but he managed to survive. The other decisive game today was the game of Jeffrey Seong, and I'll walk you through the opening because it's an interesting variation. It starts somewhat symmetrical. This is a variation of the Slav with g6 that, among others, Gata Kamsky was playing this variation a lot. Someone asked in the chat actually what would happen with castling after knight b5 in the Anish Giri game. That's a question from Honti. I believe the answer, I don't have the position in front of me anymore, but it was just queen takes d8 followed by knight c7. And that's why you had to take first and play knight a6. So so in this position, bishop e2, bishop g7, castles, a4, and again there were some Kamsky games here, which I think, and Mamedyarov has also played this way with white. And it's possible, instead of knight c6 on move 10 here, Kamsky in the last few games played bishop g4 first, which maybe is a little bit more accurate. And if bishop a3, he had one game with bishop takes f3, and I think here black is probably just okay. You give up the bishop, but the bishop pair is less important than being able to develop freely in this relatively close position. So, but Artemiev plays knight c6, bishop a3, bishop g4, and now after knight e5, it's surprising because it looks like white is allowing black to make a bishop trade that he wants, but this position is actually quite difficult to play for black, and I couldn't quite find a path to equality. I mean, it's going to be something that I'm sure people will look at. It doesn't look like much for white, but he plays all natural moves. And here, it's just it's a very difficult position to play because even though it's going to be equal material and symmetrical pawn structure, the white pieces are just slightly better placed. White just has a little bit more development. The king is a little bit safer, and so yeah, it was a surprising game. And you can look at the rest of the game. It's a long game, all the way into a rook endgame, but I couldn't find an easy way to equalize this position. I mean, he chose queen d3, which I think sort of admits that it's worse. But other moves like, say, bishop takes e5, rook d1, queen somewhere like queen b8, and now we can either play bishop e7 first or queen takes e4 first. I think bishop takes e7 maybe is a little bit more accurate, and it's just not that easy for black to play. Queen takes e4 is possible too. Bishop h2, king h1, bishop d6. This one might actually be okay for black now that I look at it. So I think bishop takes e7 might be the more precise. I do think that queen b8 was a better attempt than what he did. Rook e8. Yeah, I mean this is what he should have tried, and maybe bishop a3, bishop h2, king h1. I still think this is not an easy position to play because white intends to play rook d7, and yeah, it's just not so easy for black to get out of trouble. So it's sort of a surprising. I thought this was a deceptively strong opening for white, And so yeah, interesting game, and I think this is Jeffrey's first win in the tournament. So interesting. Um, the other games were a little bit more prosaic today. A few draws. Anand against Vichugov was a pretty quiet draw. Um, the Van Forest against Duda game was a C3 Sicilian that got exciting at some moment. A very funny end position. I'll show you the end just because it's cute. Um, this is a black has just won a queen. However, the white has a perpetual with knight g6 and knight f8. So that was a funny end to a otherwise fairly quiet game, and I think that covers it. I did want to talk a little bit again about the fantasy chess competition that we started running, and I will actually show you. I will show you today. What I'll do is I will show you my picks, which I think this way you're going to start with an advantage, because you will know what I think you should do. So the link to the fantasy chess is just below my head now, so you can see it. So you input your username here. This is mine, and then you say the result. So in this game, of course, I'll give you a couple of clues. First of all, when you play these fantasy chess things and you need to win, you have to sometimes go for a few bold choices. So, you might think that Magnus has a better chance to win than Duda, but you have a chance to win 15 points. If you want to have a chance to win first place, you can't just go for the obvious one at every point. However, in this case, I will pick Magnus winning. I will pick a draw for the Fabiano game. I'm going to say that Firouzja is going to have some problems tomorrow, and Anand is going to win. I think he's running out of wind a little bit. I'm going to say that that Wesley So is going to draw in this game. Of course, that's a tough one. Just 1 point for being right is tough, but it's I'm just going with my gut. I'm going to say that Van Forest is going to win because he's just having a sort of a breakaway tournament, and I think he can keep going. And Artemiev has been a little bit shaky. And then Anish Giri, probably a draw. We have a fun thing here, under 38 moves or over 38 moves. I don't know if they're trying to make fun of Anish here, but I'm going to say draw in 38 moves or more. And Vichugov versus Dubov, that's a tough one. Both players really are not having the tournaments of their life here. I'm going to say that Vichugov wins because I think Dubov's draw today is just such a downer, like not to be able to get much after getting such a better position out of the opening. Will any player go the entire game without castling? I think yes is a clear answer here. How many players' kings will make it into their opponent's territory? Well, that's a tough question. I'm going to say, let's say 3 or more players because you got to take some shots and so on. So I'll let you finish this up. But the winner will win one of our SFL mugs that have been going viral, and yes, and we're going to keep going. We're going to keep going with that until the end of the tournament. I'm going to leave you here with a couple of things. First of all, again, we are running this Magnus Carlsen attacking without sacrificing video. It is available for free for premium members, and you can also purchase it. If you're not a premium member, you can just purchase it. It's very much the way he's been playing. He has not really sacrificed anything. Today he sacrificed a pawn, but he's often attacking methodically without necessarily giving up any material. And finally, we are also featuring Chessable course for Wake 2020 using their proprietary move trainer, and I recommend that you check that out also. This is, again, Grandmaster Pascal Charbonneau. Thank you very much. I apologize for the sound issues I had this morning. I assure you it's going to be fixed by the next time, and have a good night.